God of War is the new PS4 exclusive title from Sony Santa Monica. It is releasing this Friday, April 20th. This is the fifth entry in the God of War series, actually. We've previously had God of War 1, 2, 3, and Ascension, but it's been several years since we caught up with Kratos. Now he's back, he's beardier than ever, and he's got a kid. So this is a whole new generation and a whole new, era for God of War. I'm Ashley.
I'm Adam.
And we played through the game. We received copies of the game from Sony Interactive Entertainment. Thank you very much. It's actually the first time we've ever got early game codes from Sony. So that's kind of cool.
It was a good one to get early because man, is that game good.
It was.
Spoilers,
I was fighting for it for sure because this is definitely one that we wanted to check out. We have both played through the game.
Yep.
We have a lot of thoughts. I am new to God of War as a series. I did not play any of the previous games. You did.
Yeah, I played 3, and my friend played 1 and 2 while I watched many eras ago on PS2. But 3 I really liked. I thought that was a great game.
So we're approaching this game from slightly different perspectives. I have no idea what is traditional for the series and what is entirely new this time around. Adam, you have a much better idea of what might be a throwback, what is traditional, what's changed, all that stuff. Mm-hmm. So just for your FYI, if you're looking for perspectives as far as who knows what stuff, there you go. So, God of War.
God of War. Good beard.
Good
First
beard.
off, great start. We're in a good spot already.
Best beard, 10 out of 10. This game is a new era for God of War. It is not a reboot.
No.
It is not a reset.
No.
The things that happened in the previous God of War games are canon. I've seen it being put around the internet that it's being referred to some places as a reboot. It is not.
But it story-wise it's not. But like in terms of gameplay, and it is, because in previous games it was much more of just like a fast-paced action game. You're swinging your axes all over the place. It's not really as story-focused. It's all just like spectacle and go. This game is much more like you can tell that they reworked a lot of the systems. They reworked combat. They really focus on story in this game, which is like a great change. And like perspective change and all that sort of stuff. So I can see why they would sort of reboot the title, but not the story, because the story is still it's a continuation, like much later in the world of God of War, but it's still following God of War 3. It's still a follow up to God of War 3.
Yeah, and this is a big change for it. For one, the location is changing.
Mm-hmm.
We are now we're dealing with Nordic gods, Nordic mythology, and Kratos has a son.
Yep.
So the game starts out, the basic premise is his son, Atreus,
Actually, his son's name is Boy.
His mother's died, and they are taking her ashes to the top of a mountain to be scattered. Everything starts there, and then the story as it goes unfolds. Yep. But that's basically the opening cinematic.
Yeah. The goal is, the overarching goal in the game is take your mother's ashes to top of mountain.
Right. And so that's how it all starts. And that makes it, if you think about it, a very personal story. And
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of that personal relationship building is what drives the game.
Yeah,
it's what drives the story forward. It's what drives the characters forward. In a lot of ways, it drives the gameplay forward.
Yep. Yeah, there is a story in this game that happens as the game unfolds. But I would say the strongest part of this game and the best story that's told is the relationship between father and son. It is a very like father and son, relatable, and just like it's such a well-written story, especially in the context of their relationship.
Yeah, I think this is the kind of game that's gonna hit a lot of fathers very close to home.
Yes.
Just it's the relationship with a father who is this old world god type, and his son who's a pretty normal seeming kid. So Kratos will bust out a Atreus to me.
Yeah.
And Atreus just goes, yeah, I'm coming.
Yeah.
And that dynamic is really like very charming.
Totally normal kid, and then God Dad, who's just like very straight faced.
Yeah.
Doesn't have any give. I think he giggles once, maybe.
Yeah, well, and they get a lot of that byplay as you go through the game. So really, the discussions that the two have, the stories that one of them is telling the other, that is what keeps you company through a lot of the game. That's the sort of very quiet storytelling that happens in addition to the larger plots of the game, which I don't think we'll go too into detail with, because there's a lot about this game that is charming because of the discovery.
Yeah,
And
absolutely. There's so much to this game that you just want to find out on your own.
there's a lot of the different systems as well that rely on each other, which involves both like the game design, but just the overall gameplay. You'll find that exploration will then end up helping you in combat, and you will then build things to get armor and skills, which will then also help you in combat, which will then also help you with collectibles and so on. So everything is really very interrelated. Combat in particular, that's always going to be a big focus of God of War, is pretty solid. It's, as I understand from what other people have said, it is slower than previous God of War games.
Yeah, it's definitely not as rapid fire. I don't feel so. One of the things that surprised me early on, and this is combat related, it's the difficulty felt. It was actually, I felt less like a God of War, more like a big guy with a beard and axe. And I was a little surprised, not put off, but it is surprising early on. And this has to do with both accompanying yourself to a new combat style, but also that the game does feel a little harder just from the get go. But the combat takes some getting used to. But once I did get used to it, I was totally in. But all the mechanics so can we talk about the weapon you get, the axe?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the game features an axe, and that's his main weapon. Like, you also can go barehanded and punch people real good, but that's
And
kind
there
of
are
on the side.
advantages to that as well. So
Totally.
Your choice of approach to combat has a lot of effects. If you go with axe, it's basically a frost axe, so it has chances of freezing certain enemies. It will do more damage against fire-based enemies. If you go in with fists, you build up. You basically disorientation. You stun.
Yeah.
You can stun your enemies.
And they'll leave it open for finishers.
Right, and that's, I guess, the closest thing you get to some of the quick time elements from previous God of War games, where it's not a quick time, it's push button.
Yeah,
but it seems like it fills that need.
Yeah, in previous God of War games, you'd have those same finishers, but it would very much be like quick time sequence, where he would do an action and then you have to push circle really quick, and then it was do an action and then you have to push square. It's like this game is much more you push the finisher button and he'll do the finisher. There are occasions when you'll need to punch the enemy for extra damage or just to do damage, but it doesn't feel as God of War games were like known for being way too quick time heavy, and this is definitely not that. So they've definitely addressed that problem. One of the features of the axe that I did not know about going in, but was very surprised by was if you've seen like Thor, you know that when he throws his hammer, he can go like this and pull it back from anywhere at all. And the same goes for the axe. And the first time I did that, I had the biggest, dopiest smile painted on my face. Because A, it really surprised me, but B, it is done so well. Like, there's something to do with the sound and the feeling of like the rumble in the controller, and like when he grabs it is just perfect. And I feel like everything they've done with the weapon in this game, the axe, is like it's incredible. Like, there's so much love put into it. Like, you'd never want to stop using the axe.
Yeah, that axe does become very central to your gameplay experience. And they did a great job. It feels like it's got weight and heft. It feels powerful when you use it, but it's also this bigger, slower weapon that you have to make accommodations for to some degree. Have you ever forgotten it?
Oh, yeah.
I've left it behind on whatever field of combat. Didn't realize that I hadn't recalled it. Went through doing some level of traversal, realized I needed it, called it, and then it takes some time.
Yeah.
And you hear it thunking through walls as it comes to you.
Yes.
So that's actually a really fun
It
experience.
is. Yeah. So in addition to combat, so there are light attacks, there are heavy attacks. In addition to that, there are
There's additional skills as well that you unlock as you play. As you beat enemies, you build up experience, and then you can unlock different attacks. And it's not one after the other. It's almost like just a like a hodgepodge,
Yeah,
and
like
you can
sometimes
choose
you can
exactly which ones you want to unlock.
Yeah, sometimes, like for example, if you unlock a certain skill, you'll be able to hold R2 instead of just pushing it, and you'll do an even heavier attack. There are also things like runic attacks, which are you socket them into your weapon. You have a light runic attack and a heavy runic attack, and those will do things like it'll have a cooldown on it, so it'll be like a special activated skill.
They can be used once every 60 seconds.
Yeah, 30 to 60 seconds, whatever it might be. And some of them are like you'll swing your axe and you'll just do like a big burst of energy and knock everyone back. That's like one of the early ones you get. But there's a good amount of those throughout the game, and those are super interesting. And you can upgrade those. Pretty much everything in the game you can upgrade a little bit. Like there's more depth than just the base level of whatever it is, which is great. On top of that, you have Atreus, and Atreus is your son, and you are taking him out of the world, and
It's really his first time
Yeah.
leaving home.
Yes, and you're teaching him how to be a warrior, how to be like someone who can live on their own and take care
How
of
to
themselves.
survive.
Exactly, and part of that is he has a bow and arrow, and you will command him to shoot people. And to do that, you can. If this is the one part of combat I felt like added a layer that felt a little bit fiddly, but you do get used to it eventually. But you'll push square, and whoever your camera is centered on, he will shoot arrows at them, and those can do things like stun them or other various effects. That combat mechanic, even towards the end, there were times where I would want him to shoot someone in the back, and you can specifically aim, like you can pull up your crosshair and aim directly at them, and he will shoot the correct person. But in the heat of battle, when there are people hitting you, it's very very fiddly to control. So there's a couple instances where you want him to shoot someone and he won't, and that's like a minor gripe with the combat, but it is another layer that is exciting.
Yeah, and he will, if you aren't actively commanding him, he will dart around the battlefield. He starts off, largely just a bit weaker, but more hesitant, and as he gains his confidence as well, he starts like jumping on dudes' backs to try to keep them open, so they can't guard against your attacks, and so he'll call you over to help. Or there are a couple of other developments. He also has runic attacks, which are pretty great. They normally consist of calling in a swarm of spectral wolves or something like that. So he has additional abilities as well that you can ask him to set off.
And yeah, like you said, he grows as the game goes on. As you progress and he progresses as characters, he will get better. And so do you. Like you get more powerful as time goes on because you're leveling up and getting your skills.
But it's almost nicer to see him getting stronger, and it's reflected in the banter and the dialogue as well. As he goes from you need improvement to like I see you paying attention, and that's just a really lovely thing to see as you build it.
On top of that, with combat, like the animations are pretty much second to none. There are some animations in
I would agree. There's one that bothers me.
I know which one you're talking about.
So there's as you stun enemies, you then can launch the special attack. There's one enemy type, I think it's the heavy dragger, where if you do that, Kratos will basically pick him up in a headlock and run him across the combat area, theoretically into a wall or something.
Right.
But dragging him doesn't seem to do any additional damage, and if you're in a corner, which I ended up being pretty often, then he's just running into a corner. And where everything in the game is so beautifully polished, that stuck out a little bit to me.
There's two parts of that. First, I found out that you can pull either the light attack or the heavy attack, and it will immediately cancel the run and finish up the move. The other thing is, if the reason that he runs around is because the finish of that move is throwing them, so you can run around and find a place to throw them off a ledge. So there is a point to it. I know it isn't the best thing up front, but there is still a reason for it.
On that note of little hidden details, you can lock onto enemies, which can help with your work with Atreus.
Yes.
So it's clicking in the right thumbstick.
Almost never did it.
Right. I did it accidentally several times before I figured out how to do it intentionally, which is that's part of the discovery of the game. It seems like there are a lot of smaller details that they don't explicitly explain to you that you will just discover as you go.
Yeah. There are little things in the combat like that that would happen and make me like almost jump for joy. Like I threw an axe at a guy in the back, and then someone else was running at me, so I recalled the axe, and it just killed him by when it was coming back, and I was like, "Oh my god, this is so cool!" Like there are many moments in the game where I screamed those words because man, can that game be exciting?
That said, enemy variety. I feel like I encountered most enemy types pretty early on, and from there it was minor variations on a
Yeah.
similar theme. So enemy variety isn't the highest, but it's also the kind of game where in combat, you said you had a much easier time, and this might go to your experience with games. I'm not saying this is the Dark Souls of video games.
Thank you for not saying that.
You've got used to things like pattern recognition, memorization,
Yeah.
and you'll do some of that with combat here as well. You know, if an enemy does something, they're about to execute this type of attack, and you need to move out of the way, whatever. So if you're a memorizer like that, it makes combat a lot easier, and the lower enemy variety is friendly to that as well.
Yeah, and there were times where it was harder and easier, and like early on it was really hard. Later in the game, I did find it got a little easy as I got powerful, but there are still enemies that give me a run for my money because it's level based, but the levels are based on your gear, so it's almost like a gear score. So if you have all level 5 gear, you will be level 5, and then the enemies have a level. So if they're level 4, they'll be a little easier than you. If they're level 6, they'll be a little harder. And if they're 7, they'll be really hard. So the game does a good job of telling you where you're at versus where the enemies are at. And they'll also have a color associated with their level. In general, you're not going to run into enemies that are like super high level because the game will guide you in the direction of basically enemies that are what you can fight. There was one side quest I went on that I got there, and I was level 2, and the enemies were level 5, and I was like, I'm going to come back later. But that was pretty much the only time.
Yeah, there are a couple areas, a couple bosses or enemies that you might encounter that you feel like you can't beat if you're running around exploring the world. That may be intentional. You're not actually meant to beat every enemy the second you come across them. There are some that you're intended to come back to, so there is a little bit of that as well. In fact, there's a lot of revisiting previous areas. So it's got almost Metroidy influences there, where there are certain areas that you'll go through, you will see something, you see a barrier or an obstacle that you know it when you see it, that you don't have whatever it takes to get through this yet.
Right.
And then you will want to come back later when you have what you need. Yeah, and on that note, there's a lot of stuff to collect. If you are the type of person who enjoys exploring the world, you're going to have a lot of stuff to go looking for. There are several side quests. There are dozens of collectibles. There's different categories of collectibles. There's ship heads. There's
like
cups.
different artifacts. And
there's
things like that.
different artifacts that you can collect and complete these collections.
Yeah, the game does a really good job for people that are if you like collectibles, the game does a really good job of every area you're in, you can open up the map and it will say, you've found 1 of 3 of these kind of chests or 3 of these kind of chests, and you only have 0 of these. You need to go, and it's like there's 2 undiscovered things, so you'll know like what your progress in a given area is. And in general, you're given most of the tools to do everything in an area the first time you visit it, but there is always going to be like 1 or 2 things that will remain undiscovered that you're like, I know I can't do these just yet. Right. But you'll be able to come back to them. The exploration in this game is the thing that I think I liked the most, aside from the character banter. Like, I love exploring, and almost all of the collectibles and treasure chests are kind of like a light puzzle. Like, it's not super complicated, but it takes a little bit of brain power to figure out, and you get that reward of like, I got it, I figured it out, there's the light bulb, and then you get to open up the chest and get whatever's in it. And on top of that, like when you're collecting all the collectibles, you're getting a ton of XP, you're getting a ton of gold, so that your overall journey is easier. So for me, I never had problems with XP, I never had problems with gold. I bought everything I wanted, and I got my skill tree was completely filled out by the end.
Yeah, see, and I approached it a little bit differently because I got very into the story, and because the developers had already said there is not a new game plus, but a way to continue playing in that world once you've completed the game. I didn't feel too much pressure to do every single side thing ever because I figured I will still have the ability to, and I was really into the story this time. So I did a couple of side quests, a couple of things just around as I was going through an area, but I didn't require myself to do what I normally do with a game, which is do absolutely every side thing before moving on. Mostly because I tried a couple of them and realized quickly that I wasn't meant to beat them yet.
Right.
So I gave myself permission to move on. And it's very freeing, by the way. I don't do that often in games. Usually it's completed 100% and then advance the story. But I went more through the story this time, and so I didn't have everything completed right off the bat.
Yeah, and I didn't do everything either.
And it did make combat more difficult for me. I will admit that.
Yeah, and I will say, like, I did some of the side quests, not all of them, but for the most part, I was just doing the collectibles in the areas I was going to, and that alone was really satisfying. And it's a pretty meaty game. Lengthwise, after doing a handful of side quests, and I was pretty thorough in collecting all of the stuff in the areas and the story takes you to, and I was about 25 to 30 hours, and for a game like this, story that's pretty long, and I pretty much loved every minute of it. How long did it take you to beat?
Yeah, I'd say I was probably around the 30-hour mark, but that's not including all of the additional collectible stuff. There is some stuff that I'm still going back and working on, but for completing the story, not rushing per se, but focusing on it, I was probably more towards the 25-hour than 30-hour, but definitely in that range.
Yeah.
And I feel like I've easily got another 10 to 15 hours if I want to run around and do collectibles.
Yeah, I was looking at my collectible list, and most of them I'm at, like, even after thoroughly exploring for the story, I'm at like 25% completion for a lot of the areas. So just collectibles alone, I probably have 10 to 15 hours. And then there's also side activities to do, like favors and labors and things like that. I could see, if I wanted to complete this game, I could see it taking another like 15 to 20 hours, which is it's awesome. I have one complaint coming from, and it's not a necessarily bad thing, but if you have expectations from previous God of War games, one of the things you know is that in God of War, it's largely about spectacle. You're fighting in we're talking God of War 3. Like in God of War 3, you're fighting gods, you're fighting giants, people the size of mountains, and there are just ridiculous like boss battles, ridiculous kills, and everything is like a ridiculous spectacle. But it's amazing. In this game, there is that, but it is definitely toned down. Like they don't go to as many ridiculous places. The places they do go to, I thought were fantastic, but it is not as much of a spectacle.
Yeah, there is much more variety as well in terms of the kinds of places you go than I thought there would be going into it. Initially, based on the initial gameplay footage and trailers that I'd seen, I was assuming you're going to be stuck, basically in snowy trees more or less the whole time. And that is actually a really lovely area when you're exploring it, but there's a lot more variety as well that, we show like a little bit here and there, but are staying away from some of the bigger spectacles that you get to, just so because they're something that are more powerful when you get to be surprised by them.
Yep, I had a little bit of the same worry. I was like an hour or two in, and I was kind of feeling like, man, this is kind of drab. And I was like, I'm kind of worried. But pretty quickly, it starts to show you that it has more to offer than just like dead trees and snow. And I love it.
Yeah. And then as far as we haven't covered off some of the other things that you do in the game yet, like how armor comes into it. We did briefly, and that everything has a level, and how that all balances out. This game is the first time, as I understand it, you can customize Kratos' armor and abilities.
Yeah, I don't believe you could do anything armor-wise in 3. Right.
So in addition to being able to customize every element of, say, your axe, you can get a different handle. You can sock it in the different attacks, abilities and all that. There's also your armor. So you can customize basically your chest armor, you can customize your waist armor, and you can customize wrist armor.
Yep.
And I found that interesting largely because it seemed like it was going to be a bigger part of the game than it ended up being.
Yeah, I'd agree. So the game also has a rarity system. It goes like common, rare, epic, legendary. So it's kind of like WoW, where they're all colored depending on how important or rare they are. I did find myself like not caring a whole lot. Like I would just go to the vendor and buy whatever was the highest level thing I could, but it never really felt impactful. There are occasionally armors that have like a proc where it's like you have a low chance of doing X if this happens, and that was okay. But it was,
and those increase as you get more towards the legendary side of the scale.
Yeah, I will say the itemization in the game was a little weird. There are definitely occasions where early on in the game you'll encounter this armor set that you need to kill a bunch of these really rare enemies for, and it's like, all right, well that's definitely something I can take on later in the game. I'm gonna handle that as the game goes on. I'm definitely gonna see more of those things, and I did that, and I went to get the armor set and I realized it was like a rare, and I was already using legendary equipment, so there's no reason for me to go back to that stuff.
Yeah, so I feel like the balance there is a little bit off.
Yeah,
it seems like the differences in the different types of armor aren't as useful as I thought they might be.
Right. The armor seems more like a reward for completionists. There's legendary armor in the game, and most of that stuff is gotten post game. Or if you really want to take your time, there are some places you can go to get better armor, but it's mainly aimed at post game activity. And there is a good amount of end game content.
Yeah,
so.
there's a lot. There are several things that I realized I was not equipped for it, and figured I'll come back to it later. And it turns out later is probably going to be, in this not New Game Plus, but this post game content.
And then I love when games do that, when they give you stuff to do after the credits roll, because like if you're super into the game, you're gonna want to keep playing, and there's certainly reasons to keep doing that.
Yeah, which is definitely the boat I'm in right now. Having not played a God of War, I was initially concerned that I was going to be put off by the brutality of the combat, because some of those finishers are really brutal. Turns out I don't mind them at all. If I was going to be put off by not being familiar with the backstory. It turns out that was not a problem whatsoever. Just from what I absorbed via osmosis, I guess, I had some idea of what Kratos has done before. I didn't need the details. No, I think they didn't drive anything home, but I think there are a couple of things that would probably have been more powerful had I played the previous games.
Sure. I think that for the most part, though, the game really does a good job of making this a story that you don't have to play previous games and you can just enjoy it as it is. And because it's so strongly about the relationship between characters, I was telling you, like, the story is amazing. But for me, the most important part was just seeing how these characters develop, and those personal relationships are so strong in this game that
and they're very, very well done.
Yeah, they're well acted. That's another thing. The acting in this game is fantastic. All the voice actors are like top notch,
and it's supported as well by fantastic graphics. The game looks really incredible. It's almost so detailed that at times I had difficulty locating Atreus because there's so much detail in the world to be seen.
The character models, I look at them and I can't see a flaw. Like I look at Kratos and I'm like, this is unbelievable. I'm on a regular PS4, and I had, in the early goings, I had one issue with frame rate, and then I had another issue later on. But I'm talking about like a total of 10 seconds throughout a 25-hour experience, so not a big deal at all. And for the obviously overwhelming majority of it, it looked incredible.
Yeah, I played some on a base PS4. I played primarily on a PS4 Pro, and the performance there was staggering. The one caveat I have there is that this is the kind of game that you're going to want to make sure you're in a light-controlled situation for. If you've got windows glaring on the screen, you're going to have a bad time. There are a lot of very bright areas and a lot of very dark areas, and so it can be difficult to pick out a lot of detail if you don't have every light off
Yeah.
Because you want to be in a dark room getting every detail on the screen in order to make out the entire world and see everything that you need to be seeing.
Yeah, if you're one of those people that slides the brightness all the way up on games because you get scared, don't do that, because
It actually washes everything out,
you
too.
need light and dark to see everything, including collectibles if you're a collector.
Yeah, so that's a bit of a caveat there. Just there's so much gradation there. Want to be careful with your light, but otherwise everything looks really good. It's all just stunningly done.
It's one of the best looking PS4 games I've ever seen.
Yeah. And as well, all the performances are supported by great graphics, also great sound. The voice acting was very well done, but so was all of the surrounding audio.
Yes.
Whether it's the satisfying thunks of the axe, or if it's the sound of footprints in snow, which they actually leave footprints, and that's incredible.
Yeah, and it varies on how deep the snow is. Oh my god, it looks good. Yeah, I would also even say the feel, because the vibrations used, the rumble is used very well in the controller. It really punctuates big moves. It really punctuates things that should feel meaty. That stuff is done incredibly well, and some games don't really. Some games just make it go, and this one, you can tell they put a lot of effort into how it feels.
But you mentioning the controller does bring up one other gripe that I have, and again, this is telling you how great this game is. That these are the gripes that I have. The controller uses the colors on the actual controller to sort of punctuate things that are happening in the game sometimes.
Yeah.
So if you're low on health, it might be flashing red. Or if you're in a cave, maybe it's going to be a lovely blue. But here's the thing. You want to be in a light-controlled situation in a dark room so you can see everything on the screen, at which point the controller is so bright it becomes distracting.
Yeah, I've had the controller reflect off the screen once, and I was like, dang it. But this, again, super minor. Not even a real gripe.
Yeah, it's that level of what are my complaints? Oh, the controller is sometimes bright. So overall, no, it's a great game. I think they've done a fantastic job here.
Yeah.
If you had to do it again,
this is one of those.
If you had to spend your own money on this, because again disclosing we did get these codes from Sony.
Let me put this out there. If I added to cart the God of War Collector's Edition, which is $150, the special one, the Mason Edition, and I was like, should I buy this? Even though I already own the game, should I? And yes. So this is one of the few games that I would almost call a don't miss kind of game. It's so good. Yes, 100 times over I would play this game. This game is so well done.
I think it's also worth noting that this is a game that is probably good to pick up around launch because there are so many lovely surprises in it.
Yeah.
And if you can go into the game and be surprised by those things without knowing them ahead of time, do it. Yep. It makes the experience more powerful. And now that it's launch time, people are going to be playing, people are going to be talking about it, and some of those surprises people will also want to talk about because they're powerful. Yep. So the sooner you can play it and the fresher you can go in, the better.
Yep.
I'm gonna go back to it. I would absolutely buy this again.
Yeah, it's too good to miss.
Yeah. So that's what we would do. But curious on knowing your thoughts based on all this information. Is this a game that you're going to check out? Is this a game that you have any interest in? And does this discussion help you make a decision? Let us know in the comments. And again, thanks to Sony for providing the game copies that we used in this discussion and that we were able to use to take the footage for the video. So everyone gets these copies if it's pre-released, they're from Sony, but I figure the more transparent we could be, the better.
Yep. Totally.
Just instead of just assuming that everyone knows that that's how we got them, they were provided. Every game that we've done a discussion like this for has been provided.
Yep.
But yeah, full disclosure, we just want to be very transparent with you guys. If this is helping you, great, let us know in the comments. We'll be doing more videos like this, hopefully, as we get more games to play. So to make sure that you catch all those, subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed already. And yeah, we'll keep you in the know.
Oh, there do I see my mother. Oh, there do I see my father. Oh, there do they call to me. Oh, there do they call to me. Oh, there do they call to me.